Well, the Missouri governor's race is heating up. Just a few weeks left. A large portion of you in Missouri undecided. Polling shows it's anywhere from 30 to 40% of you Missourians who are going to be voting coming up in early August in this governor's race still don't know who you're going to vote for. And it appears to be, I mean, if you believe the polls, it's a two-horse race, but I really think that there are three candidates here. And one of them you're going to be seeing a lot more from on TV, and he's our next guest in studio, Bill Eigel on KCMO 95.7. He's in this race, of course, with the current Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe and the Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. And Bill Eigel has a new ad, and this ad is dropping in Kansas City across your televisions today, and here's what it sounds like.
Washington calls us backwards. They look down on us. Well, Washington can get bent. I'm Bill Eigel. Here in Missouri, we believe in boys and girls, not its, theys, or thems. We worship God, not abortion. We cling to guns, not government. And we know where illegal immigrants belong. The hell out of here. I'm Bill Eigel. As governor, I'll always fight Washington, because that's how we save Missouri.
So that's the new ad from Bill Eigel. And we're going to get his response here once he gets into the studios on KCMO. You know, these Missouri guys come to Kansas, they get a little lost. So he should be here momentarily. But for you, as a Missouri voter, is that what you want to hear? Is that the message that you want to be a part of? That you say to yourself, you know what? That's when I hear that ad from Bill Eigel, that's going to be on your televisions around Kansas City starting this morning. What do you want out of that? Here he is, Bill Eigel on KCMO. Bill, the new ad dropped. It sounded good. Washington, they need to get bent, huh?
Yes, absolutely. You know, everything we can do to push back on Washington, D.C. is something we need to do. And honestly, we've seen an expansion of Washington, D.C. trying to addict the state of Missouri by sending us all this printed and borrowed money. And now they're not doing their job. They're not taking care of the illegal immigration. They've opened the border. Joe Biden has opened the border, allowing an invasion of this country and of this state. I've stood up and I said I'm going to do something about it. We're going to declare an invasion under Article 4 of the Constitution, and we are going to detain and deport every single one of the estimated 70,000 illegal immigrants in this state.
So how do you, what is the actual process of making something like that happen? What does that look like?
One, an executive order that's a declaration of invasion. Under Article 4, that allows the governor to direct the Highway Patrol, the National Guard, and every sheriff in this state to detain and deport every single one of these folks that are here illegally. What that specifically means is that when we find someone that is here illegally, we will detain them and remove them to the nearest port of entry of the state so that they can be processed and deported out of the country. I happen to believe that Donald Trump's going to be a really good partner in that process, because when he was president before, he made sure that they weren't getting in the first place.
So what happens right now? I mean, if someone gets arrested, pulled over, law enforcement says, hey, this person's not here legally, what happens right now?
Nothing. They have no authority to act. And with a federal government under Joe Biden that is not doing anything to take care of this problem, really our law enforcement agencies have an inability to do anything about the problem. And in fact, that's why I've called on Governor Mike Parson to do something, because we don't actually have to wait until January to get something done on illegal immigration in the state of Missouri. Mike Parson could interrupt this interview right now and make the very executive order that I'm talking about, but he doesn't do it. And this has been my problem with the status quo down in Jefferson City for the 8 years that I've been in the state Senate. We've seen Mike Parson and Mike Kehoe right there with him, not doing anything on these big red Republican issues, and Missouri continues to stagnate and fall behind the other big red states that are doing something about these problems.
What do you make? Bill Eigel's here in the studio. You've seen the recent polling that's come out that says, you know, you're running third behind the other two guys. It also shows 30 to 40% of Missouri GOP voters are undecided. How does Bill Eigel read into these polling, if at all?
I tell you, I got a love-hate relationship with polling. You know what I mean? There was a poll out a week ago that said I was within 8 points. Now there's a poll that says I'm a little bit further behind. But here's the big themes from all the polling that has come out from the very beginning of this race that started 2 years ago. One, all the polling says the same thing. Jay Ashcroft is imploding. As people get to know Jay Ashcroft, they realize he's just another voice in the same establishment that we've seen far too much of down in Jefferson City. His numbers have fallen from where they were in the mid-50s when this race started 2 years ago to the low 20s today. So people are jumping ship as they realize that he's not his dad. He doesn't have the same message. 2, there's a huge number of undecideds. I think the poll that you referenced had more than 40% undecideds. The polls that had me even closer still had very high numbers of undecideds. And that's really bad for a guy like Mike Kehoe, who has spent millions of dollars, $6 million, trying to tell folks that he isn't the liberal that he's been as long as he's been in office, and nobody's buying it. So if I had spent $6 million and was still stuck around 20% like Mike Kehoe is, I'd be pretty worried right now. We haven't spent a dime. In fact, as you just mentioned, our ads are just starting today. And this is the point. The only way these two guys are going to get elected governor of the state of Missouri is if policy stops mattering to Republicans. If it doesn't matter that Mike Kehoe supported the largest tax increase in the history of the state, if it doesn't matter that Jay Ashcroft failed repeatedly as Secretary of State, according to the state auditor's office, which found him guilty of gross negligence and incompetence in a recent report. If policy doesn't matter, then these guys have a chance. But my message of getting rid of personal property tax, how many of you out there listening to my voice right now are sick and tired of paying rent to government every December 1st for the crime of owning a car in this state? The Missouri I'm talking about and asking you to consider and supporting me to find is one where we're not paying personal property tax, where we deport the illegals in this state, where we don't sell our land to foreign countries like China. We stop selling our land and we get the land back. And by the way, all this nonsense that's going on in our schools that are teaching our kids the CRT, DEI, and this transgender nonsense, we're going to put a stop to that in the Missouri I'm talking about. I think people are going to respond to it. I think we're going to be successful on August 6th.
The farmland China deal, what happened? Because I've gotten a lot of people who have sent me this bill from 2019 where all the Republicans voted against a bill that would have prevented selling farmland to China. What is that? Because it's coming up and people are asking me to ask you about it.
So that bill in 2019 was an amendment that was offered by a Democrat that was trying to change the state law to be able to confiscate land. That's why people voted against. That's why all the Republicans including myself, voted against that. It would have been unconstitutional. My plan to get the land back is we're going to have to pass a constitutional amendment requiring foreign owners to divest themselves, transfer, sell the land back to American interests within 2 years. That's the only way that you can do it properly. That's why. And actually, let's not forget, this became a problem in 2013 because before 2013, it was illegal for foreign entities to buy any farmland in the state until the day that both Mike Parson and Mike Kehoe voted to allow 270,000 acres to be sold to foreign entities. That's what facilitated the deal of Smithfield Foods up in northwest Missouri, which allowed 50,000 acres of beautiful Missouri farmland to be put into foreign hands, China hands. And I tell you what, the idea that Mike Kehoe is going around saying that he's now opposed to this stuff when he was the guy that voted for it is exactly why people hate politicians. And that's why I keep saying the only way he can win is if policy just doesn't matter to Republicans. But the Republicans I'm meeting as I travel around the state are angry with this status quo, go along, get along mentality that we've seen all too much of down in Jefferson City.
All right. So Kehoe just spent a bunch of days here in Kansas City. Obviously, you're here today. What do you have going on as you swing through the western side of Missouri?
We had events yesterday. We were in Liberty yesterday. We're going to be in Lee Summit today. We're traveling out. We're going to be in Cass County this weekend. We're traveling all over the metro area. The folks here in Kansas City are talking about issues that are actually affecting them. Assessments on real property have gone up 35% in the Kansas City area. I've been talking about lowering the tax burden, whether it's on regular property taxes, personal property taxes, or income taxes for my entire time in politics. I used to be a small business owner. I've been paying these taxes right there along with you, and I am going to do everything I can. We're going to have a Missouri that's competing with the Floridas and Texas and Tennessees of this country because we're going to have a tax burden that's lowered and encourages. I tell you what, Pete, let me say this because you've asked about the Chiefs and the Royals
that
before.
was my next question. So please, now that Kansas is making a move, what do we do?
I tell you what, if Missouri didn't have a personal property tax, if Missouri didn't have an income tax, there wouldn't be any conversations going on with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals about whether or not they would want to go to Kansas because Missouri would be the place they would want to stay to be in that environment. But because we have allowed the tax burden to get so high, now they're talking about how can they pit Kansas against Missouri as if $18 for a hot dog somehow isn't enough money for these billionaire owners. Let me tell you, there's a lot of things that I would do with $1 billion of taxpayer money. Number one, I'd return it to those taxpayers because they could spend it better than the millionaire players and the billionaire owners of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals. We're going to make a Missouri that's going to attract not just the big teams and the big sports sports teams, but every business from all over this country. Pretty soon, those governors of Texas and Florida, they're going to wake up, they're going to turn on their TVs, and they're going to be saying to themselves, how can we create an environment that's more like what the Show Me State has put in place?
He's Bill Eigel. He's on KCMO. Thanks for swinging by, Bill. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Pete.
All right. Bill Eigel, 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.